Fides quaerens intellectum. Anselm's motto, meaning faith seeking understanding, is at the heart of all of Anselm's theistic interpretations and proofs. While the phrase is often misinterpreted as having to first accept faith before receiving understanding, Anselm strongly believed that through reason alone one can prove the existence of a supreme being with omnipotent goodness. Then, through one's love of God, they will seek a deeper knowledge of him.
Anselm was born in 1033 in Osta in modern-day Italy, to parents Ermenberga and Gandolfo. Both of his parents came from prestigious backgrounds, with his mother from a noble Burgundy family and his father also from a nobleman background. Against his father's wishes, Anselm decided to become a monk. He applied to the local monastery but was denied. Much of his early monastic life was fueled by his desire to study under Lanfranc, the famous prior at Bec Monastery. He trekked across the Alps and into northern France to the monastery. There, he studied under Lanfranc and devoted himself to scholarship. Anselm was torn between pursuing monastic life, becoming a hermit, or living off of his inheritance and giving to the poor. He consulted with his mentors Lanfranc and Mariellus, who told him to become a monk in 1060. 3 years later, Lanfranc left Bec, and Anselm took his place as the next prior. In 1060, the Battle of Hastings changed the face of Europe, as Duke William II of Normandy became King William I of England during the Norman conquest. William I's patronage of the Bec Monastery in Normandy continued, and he gave extensive lands to Bec, and asked Lanfranc to become Archbishop of Canterbury in 1070. While at Bec, Anselm began to write prayers and meditations for his friends and the wealthy. He gradually gained increased fame within the monastic community and scholarly world. Anselm completed his first major work in 1076, the Monologion, or the Monologium in Latin. The Monologium is one of his more extensive works, and he later revisits many of the ideas he presents in it and condenses them into his Proslogion. Anselm's main objective, Monologion, is to prove the existence of God, without the use of scripture or other authority. Anselm opens with discussing the idea of what is good and how that concept is understood. He argues that there must be a greater form of good that exists above all things. Only that which alone is good through itself is supremely good, for that is supreme which so excels others that it has neither an equal nor a superior. Now what is supremely good is also supremely great. Therefore, there is one thing which is supremely good and supremely great, which is the highest of all existing things. Anselm then continues and argues that all things must exist through one thing, and that this one thing also exists through itself, so it is better than all other things. Since the truth altogether excludes the possibility of there being a plurality through which all things exist, it must be the case that that through which all things exist is one thing.
To simplify the long-winded monologion, Anselm started Proslogion, which contains his most famous argument, the ontological argument. The argument goes, assume God is that than which nothing greater can be conceived, and if one can think of a thing that than which nothing greater can be conceived, then it is in his mind and an understanding. Since that than which nothing greater can be conceived is good, it would be better to exist in reality. Therefore, it must exist in reality, because if it were not, then there is something greater than that than which nothing greater can be conceived. This is a contradiction. Therefore, that than which nothing greater can be conceived must exist in reality. This famous argument also has a famous objection. Ganilo, who is also a monk, wrote on behalf of the fool and presented the island problem to attack Anselm's argument. Ganilo argues, first consider an island that than which no greater island can be conceived. This island will have all the amazing traits that one could imagine. Now if one can understand the statement, then there is such island in his mind. However, if one follows Anselm's reasoning in his ontological argument, one would have to conclude that this dream island exists in reality. It is absurd to suppose such island actually exists in reality. Therefore, Anselm's reasoning is fallacious. Anselm's response to Ganilos goes, "If that than which nothing greater can be conceived does not exist, then it is capable of non-existence. And if it is capable of non-existence, then even if it were to exist, it would not be that than which nothing greater can be conceived. But it is that than which nothing greater can be conceived, and therefore it must exist." Alternatively, Anselm could argue that his argument only works on infinite beings, and islands are finite, so Ganilos' objections does no harm to Anselm's ontological argument. After 15 years as prior of Bec, the monk elected Anselm to be the position of abbot of Bec in 1078.
When Lanfranc passed away, King William Rufus purposely kept the archbishop's seat in Canterbury vacant so that he could keep the church's revenues. It was only 4 years later, when the king fell ill, that he reluctantly nominated Anselm as bishop. After accepting the position of archbishop in 1092, his tenure was marked by consistent conflict with King William Rufus, who wanted to appropriate church lands, offices, and incomes, as well as depose Anselm of his seat as bishop. In 1097, Anselm went into exile and traveled to Rome to plead with the Pope. While Pope Urban II supported Anselm, he refused to relieve him of his position in England. During his time in exile, he finished the Cur Deus Homo. After William II's death, Anselm returned to England at the request of the new king, Henry I. However, this relationship quickly turned to conflict, and Anselm once again left for Rome. When Pope Paschal II backed Anselm, the king forbade him from returning to England. Anselm remained in Rome between 1103 and 1107. Anselm died on April 21, 1109. He was canonized a saint in 1494 and was named a Doctor of the Church in 1720, a title given to Roman Catholic saints who have been recognized as having particular influence on Christian theological teaching.